All right, we'll be starting in 1 minute. Looks like we've got folks filtering in. Yeah, Kevin, I think for next time, let's do a countdown timer. We did that on one and it was really effective.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let's get this started. Welcome to our Introduction to GitLab webinar. My name is Patrick Harlan. I'm a manager of technical account managers here at GitLab for the commercial market. We've got a couple folks here to help answer questions and drive the primary focus of the webinar. So leading the webinar today will be Kevin Chassie, our staff technical account manager on the public sector team. We've also got Chloe Whitestone, manager of commercial technical account managers, as well as Brian Capini, a technical account manager here at GitLab. Kevin, I'll kick it over to you. The focus of this webinar is for new customers getting introduced to GitLab for the first time. This will help get you oriented to the structure of GitLab, the DevOps process, and how GitLab supports the entire software development lifecycle, and things that we find that teams need to know to quickly get oriented and be able to collaborate, work together, and get their projects up and running in GitLab. So without further ado, I see we've got most folks in the webinar. This is being recorded. We'll provide a link afterwards. There will be a short Q&A at the end as well. So without any further delay, Kevin, take it away.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Thanks everybody for attending today. As Patrick mentioned, today's session is kind of introduction to GitLab. We asked that if you do think of questions throughout, I will be pausing several times to pick up questions from the Q&A. And as Patrick mentioned, we've got a team of great TAMs on the technical account managers on the call today to help answer the Q&A. So please use the Q&A for any questions that you have. All right, let's go ahead and dive in then. So first and foremost, what is GitLab? So GitLab started 10 years ago as a Git repository manager. And as we grew, we started adding additional functionality in. And at the time, so the first thing we added was actually CI/CD. And at the time, there was some debate about whether to add that as a separate application or include it in with the Git repository manager. And one engineer argued very vehemently that it should be together, and luckily won that argument, because now we've got a single application in GitLab that covers the entire DevOps lifecycle. And so it's not just a Git repository manager, but it's also a tool for continuous integration and continuous delivery. And I believe we already have an upcoming session on CI/CD coming up sometime in the future, so stay tuned for that. But you can also do things like issue tracking, wiki, and you'll see a whole bunch of other features that are covered within GitLab. And of course, we're still open source today, and we've got thousands of contributors that contribute, as well as our engineering team adding features. We do a monthly release. We've had over 100 releases consecutively hitting our monthly release on the 22nd of the month. And so there's always lots of great features being added to GitLab. So one of the things, if you're brand new to GitLab, one of the things that GitLab is really good at helping you to do is to take your team and maybe move from a sequential DevOps type process into a concurrent DevSecOps process. And you can use GitLab for different workflows, but GitLab is optimized and has been designed, and we're going to talk about some of the best practices today, so that you can get the most out of your investment in GitLab. And so the idea here is older systems or sequential systems, or you might have completely separate teams for development, security, operations. and so on, there's issues with that paradigm, right? It's opaque, inefficient. Teams tend to work in silos. There's handoff friction. There can be finger pointing. I know at places that I've worked in the past that had that kind of mindset, it was difficult. You weren't trying to succeed. You were trying not to fail and be the one who was blamed, as opposed to trying to work together as a team and succeed on delivering what your goal was to deliver with your software package. So GitLab does help you to transform into the concurrent DevSecOps model. GitLab uses GitLab to develop GitLab, and so we have built in a lot of those best practices into the tool because we actually use it and use all aspects of it, not just for development, but for other aspects of the business. So it allows you to work together. Everything is visible across all of the teams. It allows for seamless collaboration, efficiency, allows people to take action and provide full accountability for the team so that the entire team is working together towards a single goal. And then they're really focused on success as opposed to avoiding failure. So a lot of benefits, and you'll see some pieces of that as we go through the basics of the application here coming up. So one of the things that, so there's a number of different stages that have been defined by Gartner for the DevOps life cycle. And we've kind of visualized them here as kind of a loop that is kind of a continuous process, right? So this is kind of, not the opposite, but it's much different from waterfall or other systems that you might have used in the past. And the idea here is that, and you can do all of this within GitLab. So you've got issues that you can plan your work within GitLab on what you're going to have coming up. You can actually use, of course, GitLab for doing your coding and code versioning, but you can also use GitLab to do your verification, which is your CI for continuous integration and testing, automated testing, as well as using GitLab to package and even release GitLab into release into GitLab controlled environments, which can be configured and even monitored by GitLab. And of course, with all of that, you have tools to manage, provide security, and even defense of those deployed applications. And so the idea is that you're doing this continuous loop as new features or things that you want to change come in, and you can do this in small chunks, quickly, rapidly iterating to provide solutions and continuous value to your customers, to your stakeholders, whoever it is that you're developing software for. And then one other view of these 10 stages as defined by Gartner. So we adopted what Gartner had come up with for the 10 stages of the DevSecOps lifecycle. And GitLab has an offering solution for all 10 stages in a single application where you can have a single data model, single permission, single user interface, and a single place for your team to collaborate, view analytics, governance and security. And there's a significant advantage to having everything in one place. Now, that's not to say if you have some tools that you're using today that you really want to continue using or you're required to continue to use for various reasons, that you can't use them in place of GitLab, because GitLab has a lot of great integrations into some of those other tools, and we play nice with a lot of other tools, but you can do the entire life cycle in the single application of GitLab. So this is a diagram that kind of shows you the GitLab recommended process. And this is definitely what we would consider to be a best practice for use of GitLab. And let me just take a moment to walk you through what this is and what it means, and highlight a few things as we go through it. So if you imagine that this bottom line here is your production line of code. So this is the main branch in your code base, or represents the version of your code that's currently in production. With GitLab, we usually start with an issue, and that issue could represent a user story, a feature, a bug report, a to-do, could be any number of things. And in that issue, we usually use the issue to collaboratively discuss with our team what we're going to be working on, what the priority should be, maybe who should be working on it, how urgent it is, maybe even helping to define what some of the parameters are associated with, how we're going to do this in a rough sense, maybe some screenshots. And once we get to the point where that item's been discussed, to the point where we're ready to start having a developer work on it, the developer can create a merge request directly from the issue. And the merge request is the place where the developer will be doing a lot of their work on the actual changes. And you'll see in a moment how that all comes together. And so, and some other systems, they recommend creating what they refer to as a pull request at the end of the process. We actually like creating the merge request at the beginning of the process so that, as you'll see in a moment, all of the activities within the merge request are captured in one place, and you can have visibility and come in and see everything that's happened in the past and the current status of that change. Creating the merge request from the issue will automatically create an isolated feature branch where you can make changes to your code, and they're versioned within this feature branch in an isolated fashion from your production code. And once you've pushed changes back up to the server or made them directly in our web IDE, the continuous integration pipeline or CI pipeline can be configured to run, which generally will build your code, maybe do some unit and other tests on your code and give you those results directly within the merge request. You can also have it do various security scans on your code, like static code scanning and others. You can also optionally deploy out to a temporary or ephemeral review app. This is good if you want to be able to show what these changes look like, have stakeholders come in, maybe you have some tests that are still manual, and you could do those in that environment. This doesn't have to be a GitLab controlled environment. This could be a static test environment that you're using, but it also could be a containerized temporary environment. Then within the merge request, you can also do code reviews. You can do security reviews, discussions with your team. And as you do all of this and decide on additional changes, it reruns the pipeline, reruns all those automated tests, reruns the security scans, redeploys out, updates the review app until everybody is happy with this change. You can have an optional approval process. And once everyone's reviewed and approved it that needs to, you can merge this code back into your mainline branch with confidence, because you know you're not introducing any vulnerabilities. You know that the tests that are important have been run and passed and succeeded. And so when you merge this code back in, it's ready to be deployed and updated security scans and dashboards on your main branch, so that it can go out and even update your production system automatically after this short-lived feature branch for this one change described in this one issue is done. So this is the GitLab recommended process. If you're brand new to GitLab, you don't have to switch to this process immediately. You can actually continue to use your existing process and then make incremental changes. If you like, the advantages that I've talked about here, you can actually start to approach that, but you don't have to do it all at once. You could start by just creating CI pipeline and so on. So you don't have to do everything at once, but this is just giving you an image of what that final process would look like. And don't forget, if you do have questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A as we go. Now, a couple of the things that I wanted to point out here is some of the different terms, right? Different tools and different software development systems have some different terms for different types of objects within the system. And I wanted you to understand what the GitLab term is for it, kind of the idea of what it is, and then what it might be called in other systems. So within GitLab, we have projects. This is the kind of place where your code is, the core building block where your work is organized, managed, and tracked. This is where, like I said, your code lives. the history of all of your code changes, all of the results from your CI/CD, your issues and merge requests all live within this project. But we also have groups, which is a collection of projects and or subgroups, kind of like folders. We talked a little bit about issues already. Issues are could be, like I said, a user story, a feature, and they let you kind of plan and track the work and discuss it before it's started development. We also do have epics, which are a collection of related issues across different groups and projects. We've talked a little bit about the merge request already, but the merge request is that link between the issue and the actual changes, and it does a great job of summarizing all of the changes. And you can see all the discussions, code reviews, testing results, security scan results, approvals, all in one place. And then we do have labels, which can be used against issues, epics, and merge requests to tag and track work across projects and groups and use them for filtering and things like that. We're not going to go into a ton of detail in that today, but we have a lot of great information on different ways you can do that on our website and our docs page. We also do have boards, which are ways of organizing issues, and we even have epic boards to organize your epics, which allow you to kind of create columns for different variables and drag and drop your issues or your epics onto those to automatically assign those or apply labels or assign them to releases or whatever the case may be. We do have milestones and iterations, which are a way to track and group together issues and merge requests into releases or chunks of time. Milestones are generally a larger group of time. Iterations are generally a smaller group of time. And then we do also have a roadmap capability that is a visual representation of various epics at the group level. All right. One thing that I think it's important to understand, and we are going to get into some screenshots and seeing what these things look like in GitLab and in action. But one of the things I think it's important to understand is the group and project hierarchy that you can create within GitLab and some of the things that you want to think about as you're building out your structure. So the idea here is this purple group is a top level group. So you have your GitLab instance, and you can have any number of top level groups in that instance. And then those groups within that top level group, you can have as many subgroups as you want, which can then have subsequent subgroups, or you can even have projects directly in these groups. You can also have projects within the subgroups, and then within the projects is where your issues, merge requests, and so on live. The important thing here to be aware of is that if you set permissions at this top group level, they're going to automatically flow down. So if I add someone as a developer to this top group, they're going to automatically have developer access to the subgroup and to this project, as well as these orange projects over here. And so you want to add people at this top group level, being aware that they're automatically going to get permissions to everything below it. You can always add someone to one of these subgroups or projects that doesn't have access to this top level group, or you can give someone a higher permission level if you want. So if someone needs to be a maintainer or an owner of one of these other projects, you can add them as a lower level here and add them as a higher level down here. And they will only have the higher level permission down here. Similarly with labels and milestones we talked about earlier, when you're creating those, if you want to create those at the highest level that makes sense. So if you have a whole group of people that are all going to be working with the same workflow labels and severity and priority labels and things like that, you want to create those at this top group level so that everybody is using the same set of labels. If this project down here has a specific need for a set of labels that no one else needs, you can create them at this project level, and they'll have access to all the project ones as well as the group ones. And so you want to think about this group hierarchy and how it flows down. The other thing that you can do as kind of a best practice within GitLab is you can create a series of top level groups that don't hold any projects, and all they are for is collecting users. So you could create a group for all of your testers or all of your QA people or all of your security people or all of the members of a specific team. And that way you can add them on group to a project rather than having to add each individual person. And there's some significant advantages to that. So just wanted to have you give you some basic ideas on how this hierarchy works. So as I mentioned before, with this basic process, we like to start everything with an issue. And the issue is kind of our recommended starting point for your workflow. If you are using a different system for currently for issues, you can still use other systems if you want, and different projects can use other systems, or they can use the GitLab issues. We recommend definitely taking a look at them. There's a lot to offer there. And we'll go through a little bit of that here today, as well as go into a little bit on merge requests and a little bit on CI/CD as well. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on those today. It's a relatively short session today. And of course, we want to kind of get you an overview of everything so you can have an idea of the art of the possible. So before I dive into this kind of typical workflow, let me just pause and just see if there's any of the questions that we want to answer live. And if not, my team can let me know, just keep on going.
There's one about approvals, which I think would be worthwhile. So the question is, does GitLab support multiple approvals at different stages? For example, one merge request and then one approval from InfoSec, move to UAT, approval from IT ops, then move to production change approval, and so on until finally the project manager approves into the master branch.
Interesting. Yeah. I actually have some customers that are doing something similar to that. And if we actually, let me go back to this chart real quick. And this is a slightly different version than the one I showed you earlier, but I think this will work for answering that particular question. Obviously, with our best practices recommendation, what we would do is say that you would have those approvals here. And the idea is that because you're working on this isolated feature branch, you could do all of those activities here and track those approvals. You'd have separate approval rules here. And then once it's cleared all of those hurdles, you could then do a single merge back in. I do have some customers that are migrating from an older philosophy in a similar to kind of what you mentioned, where they have different silos or requirements, or like on the government side, they might have regulations they have to follow, and they're interpreting them in a way that causes them to have to get those approvals separately. And what they end up doing is this particular customer ended up choosing to do multiple merge requests. So they have a merge request that goes through an approval process that gets merged. And then when it's going into that next area, they create a new merge request for that purpose. So there's a great deal of flexibility with how you can use it. What I presented here today is kind of our idealized, but of course you don't have to. You do have flexibility. I don't know if any of my panelists would like to chime in to help answer that question in another perspective from other customers, but feel free to chime in if anybody wants to. I will take that as no. So, all right. And then let's see, do you want me to answer the other one live? I see there's another question.
Yeah, I guess quickly, and then we can send documentation as well. So does GitLab manage concurrent changes in different files of the same project and then merge everything as a single automated build pipeline?
Wow, okay. So so basically the way we're doing things, and I don't know if you're coming from a system that used Git or didn't use Git in the past. And I definitely recommend doing some reading up on Git if you're brand new to Git in general, which is the underlying technology for several different tools, including GitLab, obviously. But the idea here is that, yeah, everything that's in this feature branch is isolated, like we talked about earlier. And so you can make multiple changes to individual files. These commits could be multiple changes to the same file. And every time you make a change that gets pushed up to the server, the CI pipeline by default is going to run. Now you can change that in the configuration so that it runs only manually or does nightly runs if you want. But traditionally, we would want that to run every time it changes so you can see what the effect of that was. So if you accidentally broke something, right, you know about it right away while that change is still fresh in your mind. Now, if you had multiple the idea here is that, so this feature branch, once you've completed it, it would get merged back in, and then the next one would be created. Now, that's not always what happens, right? You could have multiple feature branches going on at the same time. And generally the way that works is the first one to merge back into your default branch will get a clean merge. It's super easy. The second one may tell you that there's a merge conflict that has to be resolved, and then you might have to rebase, pull the changes back from your mainline branch back into your feature branch, test out that, and then finally do a merge. So if you do have multiple feature branches going on at the same time, the ones that merge later that branched off from the same location might have a little bit more challenges, but GitLab makes it pretty easy, and Git makes it very easy because if the changes don't require a human, they'll just let you merge it automatically. But if there is a change that requires a human to look at it, it'll alert you and let you resolve that issue. So, all right. So let's walk through kind of a typical example real quick of what this actually means within GitLab. So basically the idea here is, and this is going to kind of mimic what we talked about earlier, but just give you a little bit more detail and a little bit more specifics. So if you have a new feature that's coming out, you might create an issue to start the discussion on it, and you might apply a label to it that lets the team know that what stage of your workflow it's in. We do not in GitLab have specific workflow. You can use our labels to define your workflow, but some systems have a specific hard workflow where you have to go from step A to step B to step C. And at GitLab, we let you kind of define that yourself using our labels. So then within the issue, you have a way to discuss the issue asynchronously and put comments in and respond to other folks' comments. You can mention different folks on the team if you want them to weigh in, and they'll get a notification. As I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention this before, but when GitLab was first started, GitLab was 100% remote, and we've been 100% remote since our founding. And so we built into the tool ways to allow fully remote teams to communicate and collaborate together. And so we make it very easy, whether your team happens to be co-located or maybe folks are working from home for the first time because of global events or other factors. You can use GitLab to kind of seamlessly do those collaborations, whether you're sitting next to the person you're communicating with or not. And the nice thing is the history of all of those conversations and the reasons behind the decisions that were made are all kind of self-documented within those comments and threads within the issue. And then, as I mentioned, once the teams kind of finished discussing it, developer would create a merge request from the issue and assign the issue to themselves. Keep in mind, in GitLab, you can assign an issue or a merge request to multiple people. It doesn't have to just be one assignee. And you might have, maybe this change is going to require backend and front end changes. So you might have the backend team start working on it and start writing code, start making commits directly to the feature branch associated with that merge request. And you might add a label to let folks know that you're working on it. Once that developer kind of finishes with some of those commits, they would push those commits to the feature branch to kick off the CI pipeline. Now, remember with Git, you can work locally, and when you're working locally on your local machine, you can commit to your local Git repository as much as you want. Only when you push it back up to the server will it kick off that CI pipeline. If you're working on the server through our web IDE, every commit is effectively a commit and a push, and thus triggers the CI pipeline. And so the developer would monitor the pipeline watch for the results. Did the build succeed? Did the tests that I wanted pass? And then maybe they would change, add another developer to assigned and add a label to it to let folks know that now the front end team is ready to start working because the required back end changes have been made. We're still in the same feature branch. We're still isolated. And then you might have the front end developer start working on it, assign it, add themselves as an assignee, and make additional changes. You can have multiple people do reviews. They can actually comment on individual lines of code. They can make general comments and even kick off code reviews that give the developers kind of a checklist of items to review or respond to. And then maybe the team is ready to push it out to a staging area and update labels on those issues and merge request. You could also do things like maybe this is going to need documentation, so you add some additional labels to let the marketing or documentation team know they need to look at this issue and do something correspondingly. And then you kind of update final labels when these different tasks are done. And then ultimately, you merge the merge request and deploy to production and then ultimately close the issue. This is just an example, but just to give you a little better idea of what this process might look like in reality. So what does this look like in GitLab? So what I'm going to do is walk you through a series of screens here in GitLab so you can kind of see what this looks like as an example. So here we have a group overview. So I'm on the group page. If you remember from the view earlier, this is actually a subgroup. This is not a top level group. You can actually see here, and we'll look at this again later, there are breadcrumbs at the top of the screen that tell you where you are in the hierarchy. And if there's too many, it'll give you this little dot, dot, dot. I'll show you that expanded in a moment. On the left, we have an overview of the group, reminds you of where you are. So we're in a group that happens to be my demo group. So we're in the Kevin Chassis demo group. And then there's a series of menus here on the left that let you access different objects within that group, including like you can view the epics, the issues, the merge requests, security and compliance information, and so on. And if you have permissions, you can access the settings. And then within the group, we're on the main page of this group. And so when I'm on the main page of the group, I get a view of all of the subgroups and projects. It's hierarchical. I can interact with it, expand these out. The groups have a folder icon, and the projects have this little ribbon icon. And as I expand these out, you would see different projects in different hierarchies. And you can create the hierarchy however it makes sense for your organization and your team. If we had clicked, so we're still in the Kevin Chassis group. In this case, I clicked on the epics, and it brought me to a list of all of the epics that are in that group. I mentioned earlier that issues and merge requests live at the project level. Epics live at the group level. And when I'm viewing this epic view, I have a search or filter where I can filter on various values, including labels and things like that. And then I can get a listing of all of the epics, the name of the epic. I get a brief information about the epic, when it was created, what its number is, and the dates that it's scheduled to be active or operating. You can also see your open epics, your closed epics, create new ones, and I'll go into an epic here in a moment so you can get an idea of what it looks like. And you'll see that on the top of a lot of these screens, you'll see the search bar that is specific to the area where you're in. This top search bar searches all of GitLab, your entire instance. And that is useful at times as well. So if you were wondering why there's two search bars, that is why. So if we click on one of those epics and go into it, so now we are in an epic view and looking at the details of this epic. And so some of that same information that was from the other screen, like who created it, when, and so on, is here. But then I get to see the details. So I get to see the headline of the epic and then a description. The descriptions of epics, issues, and merge requests, and even the comments within them. You can do formatting using Markdown. Markdown is kind of an industry standard universal way of formatting plain text to have formatting. And then GitLab has an extension of the industry standard Markdown with some additional features that allow you to reference other GitLab objects, like you can reference other issues, merge requests, epics, milestones, and so on. You can mention other users and so on. I think I have some examples of that coming up here shortly. Within the epic, you can also set a start and end date, and you can either have it inherited, which means it's picking it up from the issues that are part of the epic, or you can have a fixed start and end date. You can also see all of the labels that are applied, add additional labels. You can see if it's a top level epic or not. And I think I have an example of a child epic coming up where you can see what this hierarchy looks like, and you can see all the participants. Participants are people who either created the or were mentioned or commented in the epic. If I scroll down, I can see all of the sub-epics and issues that are part of this epic. I get a summary of how many there are. It's, again, a drill down hierarchical view. And the epics are represented by this kind of stack, whereas the issues are represented by this kind of like sheet of paper looking icon here. And again, you get some kind of general information, and you can click on these to go into the detail. If we go, so we were in the top level group and we were on epics. Now, if we click on issues, it brings us to a similar view, which gives you a list of all of the issues. Similarly, I have a search bar that lets me filter this view. Issues have a whole bunch of additional metadata that you can search on, as well as free text search. You can do free text search, obviously, for the epics and merge requests as well. And again, you get this view, which shows you now here in the group level view, it's actually telling me which project each issue that's listed, because it's showing me all of the issues. Issues don't live in a group, they live in a project, but it's showing me all of the issues that live in all of the group projects that are underneath this group and all of its subgroups. So it's showing you everything. So you'll actually get a different list of issues depending on where you are in that hierarchy tree that we saw earlier. And that's a powerful tool. So if you do kind of a issue search at the top group level, you'll get everything. And if you go down to one of the subgroups or even into a specific project and do the same search, you'll see a different set. And you can see where these issues are, again, who created them, when. You can even see some other information, the labels, and some other information about this issue, like who's assigned, how many merge requests, comments, upvotes, and so on. And we'll go into an issue here in a moment to show you the details of what it looks like. This is just showing you an example of what a search looks like. So here we did a label search and a milestone search. So I was looking for critical items that were part of this PI1 milestone. And it gives me just a filtered view to see these, and then I can do a bulk update of these issues to add labels or close them or whatever I want to do with them. Once we go into the issue, so if we click on the issue, this is what a typical issue looks like. We have a headline, we've got our markdown with different sections for headers and detail. And you can create issue templates in Markdown so that when someone creates an issue in your project, they can have a default issue template that will pre-fill it in with helpful reminders. You can actually find examples of this in the GitLab dashboard, GitLab project for when you go to create an issue against GitLab for a new feature request or a bug report. And you can kind of see some examples of that, which are pretty neat. On the right-hand side, we have all of the different kind of metadata about the issue, who's assigned, which epic it belongs to. An issue can only belong to one, what milestone, and actually there should be iteration field. This is a slightly older screenshot, my apologies. I need to update that, but what milestone and iteration it belongs to. You can, if you've assigned time tracking or due date, you can see those, and all the labels that are assigned, as well as the weight. Weight is a integer field that allows you to kind of specify the relative difficulty of this issue compared to other ones. We use it in some of the burn down and burn up charts and on some of the boards. You don't have to use it, but if you do, you can use any system you want. You could use like a Fibonacci system, or you can use a t-shirt size, as long as you convert it into those integer values, because it is adding those up, and so it needs to be a number. That and if you have public projects, you can have mark issues as confidential so that only members of the project can see them. If most of your projects are private, then confidentiality is not really that relevant because only members of your project can see it anyway. Further down on the issue, you can see related merge requests. You can actually see other related issues as well. It's not shown in the screenshot, but you can see issues that are blocked by, or blocked by, or blocking other, or just simply relating to. And this shows you merge requests that were created against this issue. And you can even see the discussions here and all of the history. This view is just showing comments only, but you can switch this to show the history or all. And you can see all the different changes every time anyone made any change to this, it's recorded. Here you can see in the comments, people have mentioned other users to get them to chime in. You can apply emojis and upvote the issue itself, as well as individual comments. And then within that group discussion, zooming in a little bit more, here you can see kind of the threaded group discussion and see some of the different comments, and you can actually see here examples of people referencing other releases, other issues, other milestones, and so on, which may be helpful, and that's part of where GitLab has extended that markdown. And then you can also organize your issues on boards. You can have multiple boards, switch between boards. Each board can have, it's like a Kanban board or similar, where you have a default column on the left, and then you can define as many columns as you want. The columns can be defined by labels. They can be defined by milestones, people. So you can use these to assign items. You can use these to for various different purposes. So this is an example of a triage board where I have my priorities across the top. Any item that doesn't have one of those priorities is shown here, and I can simply drag and drop this card, which represents a single issue, into the column that I want it to be assigned to, and it'll automatically add that label to it. Similarly, if I did a resource board and had people across, if I drag one across, it will automatically assign that person to it. You need the same thing for milestones, for doing release planning or sprint planning, and so on. You also notice there's two different kinds of labels here. The solid color labels are kind of just our basic labels. We also do have another kind of label that allows you to create a name value pair, where like this is the category and this is the value. So you can see this is priority critical, priority high, and those are called scoped labels, and you can use those to you can only have one of each category applied to a issue at a time. If you apply another one, it'll automatically remove the previous one for you, which is nice. Let's go into, so now this is a view of the merge request, where I wanted to highlight here. So once from the issue, if we've created the merge request, in this merge request, again, this is a kind of a complete view of the change that's being made. So you can see a bunch of different information here. You can see up at the top what issue it's associated with. And in this case, when this is completed, if it's completed successfully merged, it will close out the corresponding issue automatically. You don't have to do it that way, but this is a neat way to do that. You can also see which branch you're working on and where it's going to ultimately get merged into. You can quickly get the commands to check out the branch locally, or open it in the web IDE, or even download that branch if you wanted to. You get a quick view of the last pipeline that was run against that branch. and you get a quick view of the status of that pipeline. I'll show you an expanded view of this here coming up. You can also see if it deployed out to one of the review apps we talked about earlier, and you can actually click this to open that in a new window. You can see all of the different required approvals and who has already approved it here. You can define those approval rules in the settings. We're not going to go into that today, but that is something to definitely take a look at if approvals are important to you. And then if you have our security scanning turned on, you can actually see the security results directly here within the merge request. One of the things I really like about this is because GitLab knows what the last status of your security results were, it can show you just the difference. So you can actually see just what, how much you improved, or if you fix vulnerabilities or introduce new vulnerabilities, but you can also view the full report. And that way, as a developer, if I accidentally introduce a vulnerability, I get told about it right away while it's still fresh in my mind, as opposed to something that happens a month from now, and I can't remember what the heck I was working on when I accidentally introduced it. Now I have to refactor my code. Whereas if I get the information now, I can do it right away. And then ultimately, you can also do, like I mentioned, code reviews. You can actually write comments directly against an individual line of code, because you can view, this is a different view of the merge request, which shows this is looking at what files have actually changed, which lines of code changed. You can also look at the pipelines associated with this, or the all of the different changes that have been made. So again, like I mentioned earlier, merge request is kind of a single viewpoint into the change and gives you a ton of information all summarized. Plus it has the same commenting and threading capabilities that you saw in the issue. And then really quickly, I wanted to talk about high level about what is GitLab CI/CD. CI/CD, for those that don't know what that is, stands for continuous integration and either continuous delivery or continuous deployment. The idea is that rather than taking a bunch of different changes and trying to merge them together at the end of the process and then trying to do a build and test, you do those continuously, so that if you do accidentally make a change that breaks something, whether it be the build or one of your tests, you know about it right away. You can fix it right away, again, making your process more reliable and faster. Also encourages collaboration across all of your departments, allows for the early error detection, as we talked about, reducing integration and increasing speed. And this is kind of what it looks like, where you have each of these bubbles represents a different job. Each job can be optionally put into different stages. Stages by default will be sequential, but the jobs within them will run in parallel. So you could have a build job, a series of test jobs that run in parallel, and then pushing out the different environments. You can define this pipeline however you want. We also do have an auto DevOps feature that'll automatically build this pipeline for you just by turning on the auto DevOps feature, which is pretty neat. And then really quickly, just a little bit more information about labels. This is just showing the labels view within the group level. I filtered this for just the priority labels, and you can see examples of those here, but you can create as many labels as you want, use them for various purposes, including, like I said, priority, severity, something's a bug or a feature, pretty much anything. A lot of people use the workflow. If you want to have a specific workflow, you can create a series of labels for the workflow that you're using, so you can track where an issue or merge request is within that process. And then this is just a view of the milestones. We talked about milestones earlier. Milestones, a collection of issues. Generally, it could be a release, it could be a program increment. It's generally just something that's time boxed. You're setting a manual start and end date for the milestone, giving it a name. And then as you add issues and merge requests to it, you can see how many are in there, how far it's completed. And then if you drill into this, you can see burn up and burn down charts. You can get more information and see a summary of all of the information associated with that. Milestone iterations are similar, but are generally for a smaller chunk of time, like a sprint. And they're a little bit newer, but they've been around for a little while now within GitLab. And then real quick, I had a couple navigation tips for you. As I mentioned earlier, there's the breadcrumbs at the top to always show you where you are. We have the, on the left, you'll always have, wherever you are, you'll have the relevant set of different objects that you can view. So, and reminder of where you are. And then up at the top is the URL. The nice thing is that everything I do within GitLab will update that URL, which means if I want to bookmark something or send someone a link, and I've done a specific search where I've filtered the view in some way, it does update the URL, which means that when you share that link, they're going to get that exact same view, which I really like, and it makes it helpful to share that with your colleagues. So if we were to click on the little ... and expand it out, it gives you a hierarchy of all of the groups that are above where you are. So in this case, I'm down in project 1, which is part of this top group, which is part of the Kevin Chassis demo group, and so on. And if I click on any of those, I can navigate easily back up to my top level group. One other thing I wanted to draw your attention to that I forgot to mention earlier is that one of the other things you can do with Markdown is have tasks either in your merge request or in your issues, which are checkboxes, and it keeps track of those for you, which is nice on how many are complete, and you can put people's names next to them. It's kind of how we do subtasking within GitLab, because you can have multiple assignees to the same issue or merge request. And then ultimately back up at the top, we're back at the group level. And if I want to create a new project, you can create a new project here or a new group. And then you get a number of different options to create that new project, including creating a blank project, creating from a template. GitLab comes with a bunch of built-in templates. Your administrator can also create instance level templates for you based off of an existing project. You can also import projects or just create a project just purely for CI/CD. So there's a lot of different options there that you can take a look at, but I definitely encourage you to take a look at our built-in templates. There's a lot of neat stuff that helps you get a jump start there. So that is what I was hoping to get through today. If there are any questions, we have a few minutes left, and then I'll turn it back over to Patrick to kind of wrap up. But if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and we can answer them live.
Yeah, some good questions so far. So I will say, while folks are still here and while we're waiting for more questions to filter in, just want to let you folks know, Kevin, if you could go to the next slide. This has been recorded and will be available. We'll send a recording to all attendees after the event. If you have questions after the event and don't get them into the Q&A, please use our support portal for those questions. It's good for not only incidents and outages of your GitLab service, but also if you have basic how-to questions, they're really good at answering those. You can follow along for GitLab system status at status.gitlab.com. We'll also insert a link to our releases page, so you can follow along new releases and documentation around those. And definitely contact support if something's broken or it's not working. Try to provide error messages and steps that you've tried, that sort of thing. In terms of keeping up with GitLab, there's a lot of great information in the monthly newsletter that we send out, so make sure you sign up for that. We also have more of these upcoming webinars on more advanced topics and more specific topics. So as you get more familiar with Git and GitLab and working with code and issues, we have webinars already recorded for CI/CD, security scanning and vulnerability management, project management and planning, and issue tracking. So if you're curious about how to take workflows that you've been doing historically in things like Jira or other products and do them in GitLab, those are great introductions. We'll add links to some of the pre-recorded webinars to this slide deck, and also stay tuned to the same email invites will be going out for other webinars along in this series. So we'll be sure to share those. And just to be clear, these are distinct from our marketing webinars. So we're not trying to sell you anything really. We're just trying to make your life as a developer or system administrator easier to get across GitLab. With that said, we'll keep it open for another minute or two to see if folks have additional questions that we can answer. Otherwise, thank you all for attending today and hope this has been helpful.
And let me know if you want me to answer any of these live. I was trying to take a look at the ones that were coming in. It looks like a couple of them you answered in the Q&A, so I appreciate that. Looks like Brian's answering the question about exporting projects. You can export projects from one GitLab to another. We don't recommend necessarily using that as your primary backup, especially if you're a self-managed instance. We do have great backup capabilities that are available. And of course, GitLab.com is backed up and has a whole site reliability team that monitors it continuously. So let's see. James asked if all of these features available on both self-managed and SaaS, or are they different? Every feature that I pointed out today is available on both. I think the one thing that is slightly different that I should have mentioned when I said it was that if you have a group on GitLab.com, you can create at that top level group, you can create templates for your group to work with. If you're an administrator or an owner of that top level group, that would be the equivalent to an instance level template on a self-managed instance. But everything you saw here today, you can do on both a self-managed instance or on .com. And then, Mohammed asked, does GitLab have any synchronization capability for self-hosted instances in case we want to implement an active-active DR? Or yes, so we have the geo feature that allows you to set up a secondary GitLab and does a continuous sync across it. It also allows you to create a single URL that all of your team can access. It also has the advantage of if you do have a geographically disparate team, teams can connect to the one that's closest to their area and get the exact same information. And if then one of them goes down, you can promote the secondary to a primary and then restore from there, because it has all the data, and then you can work on whatever the issue was on the primary. Keep in mind, this does not replace, if you're self-managed, this does not replace high availability. We do have other architectures on our website, reference architectures, if you're interested in looking at high availability options. And we have lots of different information on there. So. And then James asked, is Mattermost tied into the SaaS version? Could Brian or Chloe or Patrick, do you know the answer to that? I don't have very many SaaS customers, so I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I don't believe we host Mattermost for SaaS, but I'd have to double check.
It looks like
Right,
it's only available on our package.
Okay, it's only available for some self-managed.
Yes.
You could stand up your own free version of Mattermost, and it's easy to integrate GitLab with it. But yeah, I do realize that you may have wanted the convenience of the SaaS. So, but anyway. All right, well, we're at the top of the hour, so thank you all for attending. As Patrick mentioned, I really hope this helps you get started with GitLab, and stay tuned for updates with the newsletters, as Patrick mentioned, and for any upcoming sessions like this. I think we're going to do one on CI/CD in the future, so stay tuned for that.